Hi, my name is Adrian Gervasoni, and I'm the Executive Manager of Advice Services Business at IFS. And we're here today to talk a little bit about IFS's technology strategy, how we see AI taking place or playing a role in how advice is delivered. And I'm joined by a couple of our superstar team members. We've got Karlo and Danica. He's going to speak a little bit about um, some projects they're specifically leading. But look, over IFS's 30 plus years, our focus has always been on how to make advice accessible and affordable for, I guess, everyday Australians. And technology, we don't see as necessarily a replacement for what we do, but rather an enabler for us to be able to further advance the cause on bringing down the cost of advice so that more members can access it. And of course, with AI, there's lots spoken about it, but what actually is it? I think there's a lot of people that are a little bit afraid to ask some of what we might see as silly questions. But hopefully today you'll get a little bit of a deeper look into how AI within a financial advice context can be put to work. As I said, not so much to do away with humans in the process, but more so to take better advantage of what the human element brings. So I might start with you, Karlo, because in terms of IFS's move into being more of a builder of technology rather than a buyer, uh, you started off a little while ago on a particular project trying to explore how AI could play a role in advice production. Can you just give a bit more of an insight into what work you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adrian. So, the two process areas that we think AI could have a large scale impact on in the financial planning sector are advice production and auditing. And currently, we have a couple of projects here at IFS that are looking to optimize those process areas. And I'm going to talk about Advice Gen IQ today. So, the idea behind Advice Gen IQ is we're looking to drive efficiencies in the production of SOAs, and particularly within the scaled advice space. And the reason for that focus is the environment of scale advice is more limited in nature. So the number of strategies that you're dealing with and the number of products that you're dealing with are a bit more restricted and limited. And what that creates is an environment where you can be more data ready, which research shows is a crucial factor for success in AI projects. And it also reduces risks like AI hallucinations because the amount of content you're working with isn't as broad. With Advice Gen IQ, our original vision was a prompt-based AI system. That's where you're interacting with generally a large language model.
Yep.
And whenever you write something to a large language model like ChatGPT, that's considered a prompt.
Right.
So if you ask ChatGPT a question, that's a prompt. And so the idea we had was this prompt-based system for advice production. And the way that would work is, so taking ChatGPT as an example, which is a large language model, with the right set of skills, you can customize it into your own application that only specific users have access to.
Yep.
And so the vision around that was, an advisor would provide the custom LLM, the client's details, and then they would prompt the recommendations. So they would type, I wish to recommend X, Y, Z. And then that custom large language model, upon asking some qualifying questions, would generate a statement of advice. We felt this was realistically achievable through a technique called context engineering. And that's where, through some code, back-end code that you deploy, you strive to get your large language model to behave and respond in a particular way, or a consistent way. So that, in combination with another technique called temperature controls, which looks at how creative your AI is in its response or how rigid it is, that in combination with context engineering we felt was worth exploring AI for an end-to-end advice production process.
Great. And your background you've been with IFS a little while.
Yeah.
And didn't start in a technology-based role. So just a little bit about
Yeah,
where you come from.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been more focused in the advice production space, so para planning, management, strategy. And I've always had a tendency to be interested in technology personally and professionally. So, with all the hype around AI, I took it upon myself to do some research and some study. So, it's been great professionally exploring how it could impact and benefit our business and the members.
Yep, it's great. And Danica, I guess in a similar fashion, you were leading our advice assurance function, and maybe just a bit of insight into the work that you're taking on at the moment.
Sure. So currently, I'm working on a project which is Check IQ. Check IQ is an AI-enabled pre-vet system that reviews financial advice before it gets sent out to the client. So you can imagine an advisor or a representative, they'll upload their documents into Check IQ, and then it will spit out a report reviewing these documents to say, is it consistent with the transcript, the statement of advice, the fact find, and the report will be somewhat of a traffic light system where it says red, well, there's a compliance breach, yellow, take a look at these things, or green, good to go. And so I find that that's really helpful because the advisor is getting this report before it's being sent out to the client. So what my team does currently, the advice assurance team, we review financial advice probably 3 to 6 months after the fact the advice is given. So we're kind of reactive in that sense. And what we're doing here was trying to flip that and be proactive in terms of assurance. So that's the project we're currently working on, Check IQ.
Great. And I think the context here is, around about 1 to 2% of members get access to advice of the funds we work with, the dozen funds or so we work with. And, our mission is to try and get that to 20%. And even if we fall short of that, at 15 or 10, we're a world away from where we are now. So we have to think very differently about how advice is produced, delivered, and how we monitor it on the back end as well. Clearly, just more and more file audits isn't the right answer in that. Maybe just quickly also touch on the approach to monitoring risks in a risk dashboard sense as well.
Yeah.
How we thought about that.
I mean, the point you make about, we want to increase advice to 15 to 20%. Essentially, we could get more resources, more humans to do that audit, but it will add to cost. So we do want to find a way where if we're providing more advice through, Advice Gen IQ, then we do also need something that increases with scale, a risk control that's able to measure that. So I think that's important. And currently what we do in the advice assurance team, we're auditing advice based on what we have a risk dashboard. So the risk dashboard is essentially saying, these are the number of complaints we received from this advisor. This is their, non-compliant rate for a period. These are the number of incidents. And so the advice assurance team is looking at that going, well, because of this advisor who is high risk, let's jump into and do perhaps more file audits than say another advisor who has no incidents, who has no complaints. Let's, do a little less for them. So it is being targeted in terms of our monitoring and supervision.
Yeah, and I think for the executive and the board, they've presented lots of information that relates back to the risk of the advice we provide. But when you present that information in piecemeal, that's what breach and incident data looks like, audit results and the like. It's hard to get a picture of, so is that good or bad, or what do these things mean in combination? So that dashboard, which you help bring to life, has been a real game changer for us in how we, I think, have a much greater comfort level over which are the 5% that might need more coaching, attention, and how do we best put our resources to work, as you said, for audit. Now, Danica, staying with you, AI, this term can mean many things to many people. What's the use case for it going back to Check IQ?
Sure. So with Check IQ, it it's not doing everything. So essentially, we're pretty clear on the AI reviewing the files, as I said. So your fact finds, your statement of advice, your transcripts. It's checking consistency between those documents, but it's also checking if it's met the IFS standards and legislation. It then spits out a report. As I said, the traffic light system, good to go is green, medium, check this, and red, compliance breach. It gives that to the advisor or the representative. Essentially, it's up to that advisor or representative to make a judgment call on what they do next. That's the human in the loop aspect of it. And they need to use their professional judgment to look at that. So, for example, if an advisor's giving an investment recommendation advice to say, change your investment options within your super, and the model flags, hang on a second, there's, a different investment option than the model portfolio that this risk profile has stated, then the advisor is expected to check that. And it's their professional judgment. They're the ones needing to act. So the AI is not making decisions. It is providing coaching to that advisor or representative to say, hey, here's what you should be doing.
The power of AI is the ability to scale something, but you have to be clear on what standards you set, like in terms of what does pass or fail or good or bad look like. So maybe just if you could give a bit of your thought process there around both the risk dashboard you spoke about earlier, but also for Check IQ, when a file auditor looks at things, you have high degree of certainty over an outcome.
Yes.
How do you account for a different standard?
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking at AI, there is a lot of experimentation involved. And so to be able to mitigate on bias and errors, you really have to train that model. And so one of the things that, Karlo mentioned was ChatGPT, which is, a AI that is familiar to us, where we're providing general responses, questions, and responses are provided to that. This AI model is only specifically around financial advice. So we're teaching it what is general advice, what is personal advice. It's a very narrow scope so that it doesn't go, and hallucinate. Yep. It doesn't create more errors than it needs to. So we've taught it specific information based on IFS's, reviews. We've fed that into the AI system, and it understands what the difference is between general and personal and what the compliance risks are. So I think that's really important to mitigate those bias and errors.
Great. Now, Karlo, technology companies tend to speak a lot about the wins that they've had and amazing breakthroughs they've been able to have. What I want to know is, I know that we've had to turn left and right along the way with the work that you've been leading. Can you just describe a little bit about some of the experiences, some of the things we haven't quite nailed and we've had to, kind of change an approach or two? Yeah, what's the last 12, 18 months comprised?
Yeah, sure. So, when we embarked on our AI journey for advice production, our biggest learning has been understanding where AI works well and where it doesn't. And as part of some of the research we've done and as part of our experiments, we came across a research paper called MIT Project Nanda. And what they identified upon surveying 300 organizations that embarked on AI projects, they found 95% of those projects failed to deliver any measurable return on investment. And so we were interested in what about the 5% of projects that do succeed? And if you dig a bit deeper, you find out that they all had common traits. And a couple that stood out was they all focused on clear and narrow use cases. So as an example, in financial planning world, that could be, let's deploy AI so that we have a system in place that ensures 95% of advice is implemented within 5 days of the strategy timing. So that's quite narrow and specific, and it's measurable. So that's really important as opposed to having a vague transformation goal, like let's deploy.
Make advice accessible and affordable.
Let's drive member engagement with AI. Those sort of projects just didn't go anywhere based on this survey. And another success factor that really stood out was being data ready. So that's so before even considering how AI could transform a process, it's making sure you have the data available and it's in a consistent format and structure. So an example would be if we think about this tool that, say, aids in the production of, aids in the implementation of advice, you would probably want all your strategy timings to always be noted as a date in a consistent format, because the AI would rely on that data to, say, schedule reminders. Whereas currently, if you think about how it usually works, is a lot of the time, the timing of strategies are noted and documented in text, next financial year, after your contribution. That solution would just fall over before you even start. So those were two really big success factors. There are a few more.
Karlo, sorry, you were talking about the learnings you had, and I'll come back a little bit more about specifically how that shaped solution design. But Danica, if I can go to you, just you spoke a bit about safeguards and controls, what you're building for. Just a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So privacy is very important to us. So in terms of the model, before it ever receives any information, we actually strip the name, date of birth, addresses, tax file numbers, etc., to ensure that it never knows a client. It's anonymized text that's being sent to the AI. And that's just because, we're still at that experimental phase when it comes to AI. And at this stage, we are being careful when we're trialing these things. So it's not just in the trial phase though, but as an advisor, as a representative, if you're going to drop your files into CheckIQ, it will automatically strip that before it goes off and sends it to the large language model. So that's what we've done is, number one, privacy is very important. Number two, I've already mentioned the human in the loop. The advisor, the representative needs to review this document to ensure it's accurate, because at the end of the day, as Karlo mentioned, it can have inaccuracies. So at the moment with testing, there's about 2 out of 10 files, so about 80% are accurate. So there are inaccuracies. We have, enabled a second AI to review the first AI's work. So think of it as like a peer reviewer that increases the accuracy, but we can't guarantee accuracy with large language models.
Which is why I guess you're talked about more about being reflected in terms of a temperature, or it's not definitive, because otherwise you'd spend forever trying to get it perfect and not miss the learnings that might otherwise be there, right?
That's right, yeah. And so I suppose from an organizational perspective as well, so the other human in the loop is the audit team. They'll still be auditing the files. This is an enhancement, as we've mentioned at the start, in regards to our monitoring and supervision.
Sure. Yeah. And again, I guess, from an executive and a board level, it's a pretty easy sell to go from X percentage of files reviewed to something that could have 100% coverage. You take the win, even though it's not the same proposition. They're complementing each other, but it does cost us time and money when we have mistakes made. And in our advice setting, obviously the risks relate to probably more about sloppy process or mistake in calculating contribution caps, or not transposing information incorrectly. They're not product failings, but there are things that we can solve for. So I guess that's the driver there, the commercial driver. Karlo, just with all of those learnings you've spoken about, with what AI is capable with and not at the moment, what has that meant in terms of your project's direction?
Other than trying to force AI to do something it's not quite ready for, we've pivoted Advice Gen IQ into a single page application solution, which is a more traditional software engineering approach. And so what that looks like is advisor accessing a website, and the advice production journey is contained to a single web page, hence the word single page application. And the purpose of it is to allow the advisor to prepare advice in a simple, centralized and efficient manner. So you're not jumping between web pages or calculators or scenarios. It's all contained within the one spot. And what's really important to us and what we've found is when we sat down at the infancy of Advice Gen IQ, we had some goals that we wanted to achieve. And despite the pivot that we've made, we still feel we're on track to achieve those goals through this more.
And you've been working with a fund or two as
that's
to help
right.
with the design, right?
Yeah, for sure. So we've been working with a couple of funds to drive the design of the system and just check it's aligned with the way they work, and that's really important when it comes to developing solutions, because getting that customer-centric product design does help accelerate the effectiveness of what you're developing. At IFS, we've always had the architects and really good thinkers about financial planning and the technical side of things, but we haven't had the builders, and we've had a concentrated effort to develop a team in that space. So we've got 4 developers currently working for us at IFS. But just back to the pivot that we were speaking of, what's really interesting there is our journey with AI has taught us that it's not purely always the answer to achieving goals you may have only thought were possible with AI. So despite the pivot we've made, sometimes AI isn't the answer, but it can be a really powerful tool, especially when you do have that human in the loop, and when variation is acceptable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
With
for
Check
every
IQ.
hour of advisor-client contact time, there's something like 6 to 8 hours of behind-the-scenes admin, paraplanning instructions, SOA review time, other admin. So there's a lot of time that sits behind the scenes for an advisor that's not client-facing. So yes, if there's a way we can help reduce the amount of time client and advisor spend together is great, but that advice production, file noting, admin, reporting time, I think we see that AI can play a really important role in that, but also, as you just said, it's take the wins when they're there to be got. So if you can save 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, just by thinking technology first, we've already seen this year alone, we've saved about an hour of an advisor's away from client time, and that remains our priority. So look, before we wrap up, it'd be good just to know what's next in your respective projects. What are you working on? Any kind of key milestones you're working to? So maybe you first, Danica.
Sure. We're with Check IQ, we're trying to ensure the foundations are right. So making the model as accurate as it can be, ensuring, as we mentioned, being intuitive for our advisors and our representatives, and essentially just making it helpful for our advisors rather than feeling like it's a compliance burden. The next phase from here is, so we've got a general advice version, and we're looking to trial that with the advice assurance team.
Yep.
So getting that tested, and then I'll be working on the limited advice investment app to ensure that that's working correctly. I suppose one of the things I wanted to mention before we did wrap up was I wanted to say that Check IQ isn't about catching people out. It is about instilling confidence in our advisors, in our representatives, that they can get their advice checked before it goes to the members, so they can feel confident that they've got quality advice. And then in turn, they've got the member who will receive quality advice and a system that's no longer reactive and more proactive. That's the message that I hope that we get from Check IQ.
Particularly important as we're starting to see ASIC take action from things like contribution cap breaches. In the past, that would never have really been a thing we'd see in like an action from ASIC on. But if we can stop some of these things at the source, I'm sure that would be welcomed by the advisors. And what about you, Karlo? What's next for your project?
Yeah, so in the short term with Advice Gen IQ, we're looking to expand its capabilities. So currently, in the current phase, it's able to handle an X number of recommendations, but we want to expand its capabilities so it can work with more recommendations. And that's really important for us because, we want to be able to scale the solution and increase the user base. So that's going to be an initial focus in the short term. From an AI perspective, we are considering how AI could sit on top of Advice Gen IQ as an additional layer. So rather than being an AI first solution, how could it be embedded into Advice Gen IQ? And we've been having some discussions with the fund about that, and the way we envision it, it would, during the advice production journey, there could be an AI system in place that aids the advisor, makes suggestions, or flags risk items. So it's almost like a risk mitigation tool. So an example of that would be, let's say the member had, over $1 million of debt, and there's just insurance isn't in scope. The system might flag, did you consider having a needs analysis discussion? So it's almost like an augmented reality. It's AI and human working together during the process. So that's a way we're thinking about AI being embedded into Advice Gen IQ. And one of the really good things about the work we've been doing in Advice Gen IQ is we've developed a lot of code around a calculation engine. So being able to efficiently and automatically determine tax calculations, Centrelink calculations, cap analysis. And that gives us an asset. And because we've got that asset, it does give us the ability to explore other advice channels. So something we're going to be looking at in the medium term is, what can we do in the member direct digital advice space, particularly because we have a lot of assets that we can use to benefit and aid that development.
Very exciting. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking a break from your project work, jumping on camera, being brave to share your experiences. Hopefully this was of interest, and if anyone wants to know a little bit more about the work we're doing, not just in these projects, but just IFS's technology strategy more broadly, get in touch. But thanks once again.